Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Fantasy Football. My name is Scott Morgenroth, along with Ryan Skolrud and Xavier McKnight. Glad to have my fellows back on for another week of Fantasy Football. And Ryan, as we say in baseball, lead it off.
Well, there's lots to talk about again this week in fantasy football. We this week in my own show with Skull King Sports, I covered a lot of the injuries and then also a lot of kind of the surprises from this year. So I wanted to hit on a few of those. But we're going to start off with the major news in football. There were 2 more COVID cases for the Titans today, so it means they still can't practice. Just a couple minutes ago, I got the official word from NFL Communications that the games, that officially the Patriots game against the Broncos has been moved to Monday, so it's a Monday doubleheader. And then the Bills and Titans game has been moved officially to Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time for now. We will see if that still happens, because if there's another positive case tomorrow for the Titans, they're gonna have to figure out something, whether it's a forfeit or something's gonna have to happen. What I am suggesting people do with their Titans and their Bills players on their team is to have a backup plan. Right now, I'm not playing anyone in the Thursday night game if I can help it, unless it's like a Robinson or a Tom Brady. I mean, you got those obviously, but if there's like a background player that you have Jonnu Smith on your team, but you're not sure about Gronk, I would have just let it go. I mean, obviously the game's already starting, but I would wait till the last minute, see how the Titans thing goes. There are going to be, especially if in 8 and 10 team leagues, there are going to be players available that you can put in for the most part, especially if you've been good about collecting depth on your team. So I would hold off until we know for sure what's going on with the Titans and the Bills, but be ready to have a backup plan in place.
Fair enough. What do you want to add to that?
Well, personally, I believe that the Tennessee Titans should have been forced to have to forfeit this game. And the reason I feel that way is because it seems like all the reports that are coming out, especially from today, they all indicate that Titans players and maybe even some of the Titans coaches were doing some of the things that they should not have been. I read a report just about 30 minutes ago, gentlemen, that said that the Tennessee Titans were not necessarily enforcing a mask mandate in the locker room. Just things that should be common sense here. And I speak about this every time I come on a broadcast on this network, being vigilant and using common sense throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. And that is a clear example of them not using common sense, not being vigilant, and just being downright selfish. They should have been forced to have to forfeit this game against the Buffalo Bills. I don't care about them playing next week, quite honestly, because I'm not going to hold my breath that another positive test is not going to come out of Tennessee, because who knows what else they're down there doing in that organization that are breaking all types of rules.
Okay. All right, Ryan, continue.
Next up, Lamar Jackson missed his 2nd straight practice today. As far as we know, though, all the reports that I've seen is he is still expected to play this Sunday. I have seen a couple people that are freaking out that they're going to have to start possibly use RG3, especially if they have Tannehill or Josh Allen on their roster, just because the uncertainty with that. As far as we can see right now, Lamar Jackson is going to play. They're just trying to be extremely cautious with his injury right now. So Le'Veon Bell has officially looks like he is probably going to be coming off of IR. He is available to come off IR and possibly could be playing this next week. Julio Jones has started doing individual drills today. We will see how that hamstring holds up going into this weekend. He's getting to the point where the injuries have started to really build up over his career. And it's causing him to miss a lot more time than people think he should. I've been a Julio Jones advocate, in many years in fantasy football, that he very often gets off to slow starts and really kicks it up the second half of the season. This year, it's very, very different simply because of the fact that he's dealing with hamstring injuries that are actually taking him out of games. I knew it was always a joke every week in years past that, oh, Julio Jones is on the injury report, quote unquote injury report. It's questionable for this week, but he's going to play. They're just holding him out. They're just giving him rest and making sure that he's ready to go. That's not the case this year. This year he is really struggling with the hamstring, and so a lot of the pressure is going to continually fall on Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage, this Zacchaeus kid who really stepped up against Green Bay this last week. Really, he was the only guy that could manage to get open. And then, we'll see what happens with Hayden Hurst. He's kind of been back and forth on his productivity. So the fact that Julio Jones has struggled so much this year just to stay healthy, if you can get anything for him in terms of a fantasy trade, at this point, I would say go for it. Get what you can right now. He may come back and be healthy later on in the year. It's very possible. But with how much he is struggling this year, especially compared to previous seasons where he's always had some sort of lingering injury but played through it, that's not the case this year. Already through 4 games, this is a greater injury than he has had to deal with since his broken ankle and what was it, his second or third year. So the other big thing, I've talked about this on my podcast, on my other podcast, but Robert Tonyan is fantasy football's top scoring tight end. And there's a lot of talk about, oh, he's the next George Kittle. He's going to be the next big thing at tight ends. And I'm looking at the history of Aaron Rodgers, and I'll give you the fact that Aaron Rodgers has not had a ton of extremely talented tight ends or tight ends that were in their prime since Jermichael Finley in 2011, 2012. So therefore, it kind of sways a little bit of the argument of whether or not Robert Tonyan can keep up this type of production throughout the rest of the year once Jamal Adams is back. Now, I said in the previous week that if Adams misses this Monday night game, that Robert Tonyan could be in for a big game because he is at that point the big receiver with Adams gone, with Lazard out. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is more of a deep threat guy, but not so much kind of a play over the middle, catch passes over the middle like Tonyan is, or like Adams is. I knew that Tonyan was going to have a decent game. I didn't see 3 touchdowns. But after this bye, if Adams is healthy, I don't see this kind of production out of Robert Tonyan. Because of the offense, still for the most part, really does rely on the running backs in the running game. They use the running backs a lot. The big target for Aaron Rodgers is Devontae Adams. And look at what Tonyan has done. He's had what? 5 touchdowns in 3 weeks on 14 targets. That's not sustainable production. Now, he may still have some decent yards, but he's only averaging 3.5 targets a game because he did play in week 1, but just didn't have the targets. So for me, I could see him finishing as like a tight end 10 to tight end, maybe even to tight end 6. Possibly. It all depends on how often he's actually being targeted, and right now it's not very often. It's just been very efficient with those targets and where he's getting targeted. So I'm a little bit of the pessimist on the pessimist side in terms of Robert Tonyan's sustainability throughout the year. I know he was a big waiver target this week, even with them going on bye. But for me, I'm still holding out judgment on whether Robert Tonyan is the real deal or not. So,
okay.
And then the surprises of this year. Obviously, Robert Tonyan is the big one. But going into just big surprises for the first quarter of the season, for me, Josh Allen And not that he's the number 3 scoring not that he's the number 3 scoring quarterback in fantasy. It's the fact that he's doing it with his arm and not with his legs.
Right.
Has been absolutely phenomenal. I saw that Dak Prescott, Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson, and Matt Ryan are all on pace for throwing for over 5,000 yards. Just so happens Dak Prescott, I believe, is actually on pace for like 6,700 yards because he's already had 4 games. I mean, I think he's averaging over 400 yards a game. He's had 3 games in a row of 300 or 400 to 450 yards of passing. Just ridiculous what he's been able to do, partially because the defense can't stop anyone, so they have no choice but to throw the ball like crazy. And so just seeing what that has been a big surprise to me. James Robinson, if you look at what he has done in this offense for Jacksonville, considering that Leonard Fournette was the guy and then got released, then it was supposed to be Raquel Armstead's running back room, and then he gets COVID and he's out. And then, Chris Thompson's always dealing with some sort of injury. So they go, okay, we're going to go with James Robinson. And James Robinson is the running back 6 in the league right now in fantasy, in half-point PPR. And his average, I think he's 8th in terms of averaging points per game. He's been very efficient with his touches, is being used a little bit in the passing game and the dump-offs, but it's been very nice to see a guy who went undrafted be able to put up this type of production, a guy that in fantasy drafts was undrafted, unless you drafted like the day before the season started. So just another sweet surprise to see. Kenyon Drake, the struggles that he has had have really surprised me. I thought that they would sort of surprise me. I was down on him a little bit this year, but I never expected that he and Chase Edmonds would have the same production as of this point in the season. That just wasn't something I was seeing. Right now, Chase Edmonds is actually being out-targeted 17-5 over Kenyon Drake. Chase Edmonds is the one that's getting used in the pass game, and they're passing a lot more than anything else right now in Arizona. DK and Tyler Lockett. I never would have thought, as a Seattle fan, that the Seahawks would be the team with 2 wide receivers in the top 10 in fantasy, being at number 2 with Tyler Lockett in half-point PPR and DK Metcalf at number 6. Just that's foreign to me as a guy who's followed Seattle for so long, and the hashtag Let Russ Cook has been going on up here for years. And now seeing it actually happen, it's somewhat surreal, to be completely honest, that they're actually letting him pass the ball as much as they have. And even in some games, it's actually been very even. They had, the game against New England, they actually ran the ball more than they passed the ball. So just seeing what they've been able to do with the pass game and seeing how they have been able to just be as productive as they have has been great to see. And then the last surprise for me that I'll put out here is DJ Moore. I expected a regression from what he had last year. Last year, I don't think a lot of people took into account when they were drafting him as the 13th or 14th wide receiver off the board this year. I don't think they took into account that, yes, he had Kyle Allen as his quarterback, but they were behind so much that they had to play fast. So Carolina last year ran the 6th most amount of plays and threw the ball the 3rd most amount of times in the league. This year, they're not doing that. While they have to play from behind a lot, in order for him to put up more fantasy points than he did last year, he would have to increase his efficiency, which has not happened this year because he was only getting 4 yards per catch, 4 yards per reception after the catch compared to last year. And then he gets Teddy Bridgewater, he's not as much of a deep thrower as Kyle Allen had to be. And honestly, for me, it's amazing that Robbie Anderson is being as productive as he is in this offense, considering he's more of that deep threat than DJ Moore is. So those are kind of my observations from the first quarter of the season as far as fantasy goes.
You had a couple of other names listed, Jonnu Smith and Austin Hooper. Why don't you shed a little bit of light to those fellas?
Well, Jonnu Smith, he was the guy that was talked about as likely to have a big breakout for Tennessee. And right now he is the in terms of points per game for tight ends, he's number two or number three. And so just seeing how much he's being used is really good to see. Tannehill was never really a big guy throwing in terms of throwing to tight ends. But in this offense, he has been very very consistent in targeting Jonnu Smith.
Okay.
And so it's been good to see him. And with Austin Hooper was a top 5 tight end last year in fantasy. And I think, again, going to Cleveland, I think people forgot that Cleveland's new coach, Kevin Stefanski, last year was the offensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, who were a run-based offense that would use play action off of that run-based offense to throw to their wide receivers, and their 2 tight ends, who everyone considers to be very talented, were nothing in fantasy, were hardly ever used. They'd get there would maybe be 4 targets between the 2 of them a game. And so now you've got Austin Hooper in this same offense that was based off of a Nick Chubb, run it through Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, pass it out to them a little bit, and then you use the play action pass to get the ball to Odell and Jarvis Landry. Austin Hooper is like tight end number 34 in the league right now, averaging 4 points per game. And so, yeah, it's been a very disappointing season for people who thought that Austin Hooper was going to have a good year this year.
Okay. All right, let me go over some headlines first, and then we'll go back to some of your stuff, Ryan. All right, first of all, Anthony Lynn announced that Justin Herbert will be the team's starting quarterback for the rest of the season. I think it's probably the worst surprise on the planet, isn't it? I mean, let's think about what Justin Herbert's done. He had a pretty good act in L.A. for his first opener, and then, of course, and we'll get to this game in a little while, but didn't hurt that he had a pretty nice game over in Tampa as well. So are you surprised, Xavier McKnight, at this decision that Justin Herbert is the starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Chargers?
No, not at all. After what he came in week 2 and he did against the Kansas City Chiefs, I knew that it was only going to be a matter of time, because Tyrod Taylor is a nice quarterback. He's a winning quarterback, but for some reason with franchises, they can't seem to get behind him to be the guy that he is the one that we want to go with for sure. We watched Tyrod Taylor in 2017 help take the Buffalo Bills, a team who at that point had missed the playoffs for 18 consecutive seasons, to the playoffs, only for them to say, we want to get a new franchise quarterback. And ultimately, they went on to draft Josh Allen in the 2018 NFL draft.
Right.
Cleveland couldn't get behind him. It looked like he was going to get off to a good start there. He ended up getting injured, just a slight injury. Baker Mayfield came in. The rest is history right there with that situation. And now, unfortunately, because of a mishandling that happened with the team doctor puncturing his lung, I really want to hear the true story behind this, because I mean, that's just insane right there. I've never heard of something like that. But because of this situation happening, now he's losing another job to a very deserving young man. I'm not going to take anything away from Justin Herbert whatsoever. This is probably actually what's best for the Chargers organization going forward. You drafted him number 5 overall in the draft. You drafted him to be the future of your franchise and to be your franchise quarterback, and the future is now. So now you have a chance to get a head start on what many probably thought would be a year later.
Fair enough. Okay. I mean, I got to hand it to the Chargers, though. Think about it. Phillip Rivers leaves during the offseason, lands in Indianapolis, and it didn't take them 9 million years like the Bears and a lot of other teams to find their next franchise quarterback. Kind of reminds me of the Packers, right? You go from Favre to Rodgers, not a bad alternative. If you're the Chargers, you go from what? Phillip Rivers to Justin Herbert. Not too bad. You don't have to wait 9 million years to find your next guy. He's there waiting in the wings. And yeah, albeit Tyrod Taylor got a raw deal, but they didn't draft Justin Herbert to sit him on the bench either. And they obviously unlike some of the past Oregon quarterbacks like Joey Harrington, Achilles Smith, and I'm sure the list goes on and on. At least Justin Herbert, to me, I mean, that's your neck of the woods, anyways, Ryan. Not all Oregon quarterbacks always work out, especially in the pass-heavy Pac-12 out there. But Justin Herbert, to me, looks like a dynamo from your neck of the woods.
Yeah, he's really shown the fact that he was NFL ready, which a lot of the Oregon quarterbacks weren't, especially going back in Chip Kelly's days, and even before that. It was so much of an offense that was very college offense. Is the best way to put it. And Oregon has started to move towards in the last 5 years, moved towards a more pro style offense. They focus a lot on defense first. I mean, their head coach is actually more of a defensive minded coach, and they work on defense and ball control more with the offense. It just so happens that Justin Herbert also had a decent arm to go along with it, and it made them that much better. I mean, Justin Herbert has been great this year. He's averaging 310 yards passing per game. He's in the top 12 in terms of, I think he's top. I want to say he's top 12 in quarterback rating, top 7 in completion percentage. He's been a phenomenal quarterback. Done very, very well. And it was really, again, it was a matter of time, but he definitely deserved to be named the starter with how he's performed so far.
Well, Mario Cristobal is the coach at Oregon. He did a good job at Florida International University, and he also coached T.Y. Hilton. So everybody knows that Mario Cristobal is a pretty fine coach. We'll go to another point. The fallout of the Houston Texans firing of Bill O'Brien. I'm actually glad O'Brien got booted right away. The last thing you do is argue with J.J. Watt, a guy who's destined to have a statue outside of that stadium. But I've never been happier for a guy to get fired more than I am with Bill O'Brien. But Bill O'Brien made his bed. Now he gets to sleep in it. He really does. I mean, getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins, how many times we've mentioned on this broadcast that was a mistake, along with the myriad of other mistakes. I'm not going to get into the amount of mistakes Bill O'Brien's made, way too many, and apparently Houston management has seen enough. So, Xavier McKnight, what are your thoughts about Bill O'Brien?
Well, I'm glad that report came out yesterday that he and J.J. Watt exchanged heated words with each other last week. They got into an argument, because now that explains why the fast track to him being fired really did happen. J.J. Watt, not only the face of that franchise, J.J. Watt is the face of the city of Houston in sports right now, period. And I understand that the Astros have won a World Series in the past few years, gone to another one, and could possibly be on the verge of winning another one this year. No, J.J. Watt, when he stepped up and did what he did in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, he became something that only Hakeem Olajuwon has been for that city. He became a face of the city, for sure. And when you get into an argument with the face of the city, that's it. You pretty much made your bed and you lied in it. My only question for the Houston Texans management and ownership is, what took you so long to finally get this done? You let this man trade away your best wide receiver, arguably one of your 3 best players on the team. You also let him trade away a boatload of draft picks for a left tackle who honestly is not a top-tier left tackle. Laramie Tunsil's a good left tackle, but he's not one of those top-tier guys. He's not Tyron Smith in his prime. He's not Joe Staley in his prime. And like you let him give all your stuff away, and now you got to sit here and you got to try to pick up the pieces of all of this. But I am excited to see how the Texans are going to respond to this. I'm excited to see how Deshaun Watson as a quarterback is going to grow from this. And I look forward to seeing who the person will be who ultimately does replace him, because I like Romeo Crennel, but I'm not sure if he's going to be more than just the interim for the remainder of the year. I get a strong feeling, Scott and Ryan, that Eric Bieniemy may finally land a head coaching job after this season is over.
Well, on a night when if I don't lose my voice, it'll be because of guys like you making bold predictions like I've been saying all week. Once they got rid of O'Brien, I think Eric Bieniemy is your first and only phone call. You know what that accomplishes? It accomplishes 2 things, okay? One, you don't have to follow the Rooney Rule, okay, because he's already a minority, okay? So you don't have to worry about a Matt Millen $200,000 fine for violating the Rooney Rule. Okay, so you already eliminate that criteria, right, guys? And number 2, okay, the Houston Texans have faced him in the playoffs, and if that doesn't give you a good look what this guy is going to do, tell me what does, because I must be taking a dumb pill. So, yeah, I think Romeo Crennel, but let's not kid ourselves. Maybe he has a chance to win that job if he has a great year. Anytime you go ahead and see a guy get replaced early in the year, that's a 12-game audition. Now, whether or not Romeo Crennel will stay that long because of age considerations is another story. Time will tell. We'll know later in the year. But the first and only phone call that should be made if you're Houston, okay, is Eric Bieniemy. Obviously, they want to fill that general manager spot first, but I don't think this is a complicated coaching search. Thanks, Xavier McKnight, for taking the words out of my mouth. And if I didn't, I'll bet Ryan Skolrud is going to do it anyway. So we probably have a unanimous on this one anyways.
Yeah, there is no other coaching choice for Houston for a head coach. I think Bieniemy is going to be the perfect spot. I think that's the perfect spot for him.
Right.
Really, I think it's a blessing in disguise that he didn't get some other jobs that he's going to be, I think he should be going to Houston, and going to Houston, moving from Patrick Mahomes to Deshaun Watson, where there are some weapons there for him to use, and obviously they don't have a first or second round pick this next year, so it's going to take some time to kind of maneuver, and obviously there's some moves that are going to have to be made by the new GM that comes in order to try to rearrange talent. That's really all I can say that they're going to be able to do for right now. But I think that if Bieniemy is given a real shot, I think that he could really turn Houston around.
Let me tell you what, in the NFL, you turn rosters over by 50, 60%. You mean to tell me you can't find a couple of decent wide receivers, during free agency or whoever gets cut to begin with, and you never know when your hidden gem, as you so kindly brought up James Robinson being an undrafted guy, okay, you can find hidden gems. In fact, you know what, guys, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start tagging you in every Conference USA thing that I get, because I'm on their mailing list, okay? I'll give you some information that most people will give you, and I'll start sending them you via Twitter, because we have a lot of good young wideouts in Conference USA, folks, and there's some hidden gems. Fair enough? And I guarantee for those people that are paying attention to it in Seattle and Houston, we have some good young studs. And for whatever it's worth, okay, Frank Gore Jr. plays for Southern Mississippi, happens to be in the Conference USA, and I don't have to get into a lot of other things, but Devin Singletary came from that conference as well. So there is some good talent in Conference USA. Let's go on to another thing. Eagles, Darius Slay says we shouldn't even have played an NFL season in the pandemic. I can't tell you that the guy's wrong. I think he really is right, but monetary reasons indicate why they are playing. So, Xavier McKnight, we're going to lead off with you. What are your thoughts about what Darius Slay has to say on this one?
He's 100% right, Scott. You know where I stand on this. Before the sports season came back, I was saying if they don't have legitimate plans in place, if they don't really know how to get a handle on this thing, don't come back and play. But like you said, we understand that it's all financial and monetary reasons why they're out there playing anyway. My only thing when it comes to Darius Slay Jr. is if you really feel that way, why didn't you opt to not play? Maybe it's got something to do with his money as well there too. But that's the only question that I have when it comes to that. Other than that, I'm in total agreement with him on this.
Well, he was hoping the NFL would do him a favor and do it for him, but he has to understand the NFL wasn't caving in that quick. They weren't, especially with the billion-dollar industry, thinking that they could get this COVID thing licked. The only reason why we're having these problems is, once again, as we say week in and week out, outright negligence. Okay, but I understand Darius Slay's point, but you're right. He had the ability to opt out, but then when you do that, you lose that thing called cash, and the checkbook doesn't benefit by it, so you do the best you can, follow the protocols, and hope for the best. I can't say that they're doing it in Music City, but they certainly can do it every place else, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, if that, again, I'm with you that if that was his stance, then why didn't he opt out? Now, there very well could be that he has certain financial obligations that have to be met, which, everyone's got to make those choices if that's the case. But if your stance is that you shouldn't be playing, then don't play. So.
Okay. All right, another point I want to bring up, Patrick Mahomes says we knew the possibility of NFL COVID-19 case before the season began. He's right. Everybody knew the possibility was there. I mean, so he's telling us the obvious, but it's true. They are there. I mean, there's no way a league, when you have so much physical contact amongst its participants, don't tell me you're going to sit here and do social distancing in the NFL. If you do, why don't we go out there and play flag football, because that's the only way you're going to avoid it. And who's to say you even avoid it during flag football? But Patrick Mahomes is dead right on this.
Yeah, he is right. I mean, there really was I don't think there was any way to do with the NFL. I mean, like we talked about last time, you had the NBA and you had the NHL who did bubbles, the WNBA that was able to do a bubble. That's not necessarily something that you can really do with the NFL. Just simply because of the massive amount of personnel for every single team. You know, with the NBA and with the and with the NHL, you've got what, 15 to 20 players, you know, kind of in that range, 15 to 25 players in that range with, you know, with coaching staff. Where in the NFL you have, was it, you know, just active on game day, you've got what, 56 to 60, plus you've got practice squad players, plus you have all the training staff and all the coaches. It's just, that's not necessarily a possibility with NFL. So yeah, NFL was obviously, there was going to be challenges with the NFL. That's the way it was going to be. If they were going to play, there was going to be challenges.
Well, the only way they were going to be able to have a bubble in the first place, if they had been willing to shorten the season and maybe do something like have teams only play teams within their division. That was the only way a bubble type of situation was going to work out with the NFL. And because we know that they weren't going to be willing to shorten the season to that type of extent, we never expected a bubble to come out of this.
Sure. I'm going to get to 2 more points. We'll get to a few football games, and then we'll be able to watch the game tonight. Dwayne Haskins has been demoted to number 3 by the Washington Redskins. Kyle Allen is the number 1 quarterback, and number 2 is Alex Smith. Do you think that this situation by Ron Rivera is a wake-up call, or do you think Dwayne Haskins is going to take his first train out of the Beltway and move on someplace else? After all, I talked on last night's edition of the Sports Exchange with Steve Ballesteri, and he said the best thing that can happen for Haskins is get the heck out of Washington. And then Steve asked me why I thought that Ron Rivera didn't sign Cam Newton. The only reason why he didn't sign him is, number one, he'd be too expensive. He knew the guy was hurt. So, and he took the sure shot with Kyle Allen. So what do you think is in the best interest of Dwayne Haskins? Xavier McKnight, lead it off.
Yeah, he should be looking to get out of the nation's capital, just simply because Ron Rivera was never 100% confident going in with him anyway. Remember when the NFL draft was coming up and we heard these slight rumors that were coming out saying that Washington could still possibly take a quarterback with that number 2 overall pick, even though we all felt about 99% certain that Chase Young was going to be the pick, and Chase Young did end up being the pick. But the fact that those rumors were put out there in the first place already told you they weren't 100% sold on Dwayne Haskins coming in. He began the season looking like that there was going to be some promise there, but reports leaked out today that he has poor habits when it comes down to practicing and film session. And Ron Rivera is a tough, hard-nosed, old-school-minded guy, and he's not going for that. So not only do you lose your starting job, you don't even get your backup. You don't even get the backup job.
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
I was going to say the reports of him not being, you know, not working all that hard in terms of practices and film study kind of reminds me of some of the reports that came out, you know, late about I mean, not to this extent, obviously, but Jamarcus Russell, where they would ask him to watch film and they would send him home with blank tapes and ask him if he watched the film. He said, yeah, I watched the film. And yeah, I went over it. We should be good. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't quite to that extent, but at the same time, if you're developing the reputation of not putting in the time in practice, not putting in the effort in practice, and in the film room, yeah, you're not going to be around for very long. And so I think obviously the best, you know, like you guys said, the best thing for him is to be out of the nation's capital, to find if he can find a new situation, and see where it can go from there. See if he can get a fresh start and hopefully keep his career going.
Yeah, the only thing that really happened in Haskins' situation is Ron Rivera, he didn't have the benefit of a preseason. Who's to say he would even made it to the end of the preseason? So Ron Rivera needed the eye test is what he needed. And after just a matter of 3 or 4 games, he'd seen enough to know that maybe this isn't the guy. But when you have a guy like Chase Young sitting staring you at number 2, and we all know full well that good, strong defensive franchise defensive players last a whole lot longer than offensive players, I think Washington made the right call grabbing Chase Young. And let's face it, you can find a quarterback later on anyhow. I mean, Tom Brady, you know, I can sit here, we go through the list of how many quarterbacks he didn't find in the first round. Joe Montana was drafted in the 3rd. So you're not necessarily guaranteed that a guy in the number 1 draft choice is going to necessarily pan out. So I think what you had was a lack of a benefit of a preseason. Ron Rivera said after 3 or 4 games, at least I tried, so we won't say I wonder what if. And he got rid of the what if, and this is where we're at now. One other note, and then we'll talk about a few games. And then
Stop. Before you move on, I have one other point that I want to add to this whole thing before we move on to the next point. Ron Rivera is also taking into account right now that because of the division they play in, how terrible it is, they actually have a chance to still get in and win this division if they can start playing better. That is another thing he's taking into account. Now, things didn't end great in Carolina with him last year, but when Cam Newton first went down with an injury last year, Kyle Allen came in and he rolled off a couple of games, and they went on a slight winning streak there that kind of had our heads turning there a little. Now, things ultimately fell off the tracks just simply because I believe the locker room as a whole knew that Ron Rivera was not going to be there much longer anyway. And when you're playing for somebody that you feel like is in a temporary situation, you're not necessarily going to be giving it your all. Those guys in Washington know that he is going to be there. He is the guy. They gave him a long-term deal. So maybe this is one of the main reasons he's going with Kyle Allen here in this situation as well. They don't have a bad football roster on paper. On paper, their defensive front seven, they're one of the best in football. And they honestly should be getting more out of them than they are. So we'll see if this rejuvenates the team as a whole to start playing more inspiring football, because that division is up for grabs for anyone right now, including the 0-4 New York Giants, if they can somehow get their act turned around. I don't believe they will, but it's just the simple fact that the NFC East is terrible right now, and Washington has as good of enough chance as anybody to come back and win it.
Well, Kyle Allen is a bridge quarterback anyways. You want to talk about a no-nonsense individual that Ron Rivera is. Ask Darius Geis. He didn't want him in Carolina, and he made quick work out of him in Washington. End of story, okay? We'll talk about the last point I want to make. We'll get to a few football games, and that'll be about it. There will be a Joe Flacco sighting in the Big Apple, or at least I think so, out in New Jersey, close enough, and he'll be taking the place of Sam Darnold, who has a shoulder injury, thankfully not COVID-19. Does Joe Flacco have anything left in the gas tank?
No. Joe Flacco used to be known for having an absolute cannon of an arm.
Right.
But he was never, in the offenses that he was in Baltimore, they weren't known for offensive prowess. That Baltimore's thing has always been their defense, and to keep from turning the ball over, ball control, use a lot with the running backs, and to and to have like one stud wide receiver. It finally got to the point that Joe Flacco doesn't have the arm strength that he used to, and so for me, I think he's. He's nothing more than a backup. He's a place filler for injury right now. I don't think that he's going to do a whole lot in this game. I think that, again, we'll see what happens. From the fantasy outlook that I look at it, I don't want much to do even with Jamison Crowder. I think that Darnold depends on Jamison Crowder. And you can tell just by his targets. I think Jamison Crowder's averaging, 13 targets a game, 14 targets a game when Darnold is playing. So I think that with Flacco there, I'm not confident in anything in that offense.
Fair enough. Xavier?
Well, I don't believe Joe Flacco has anything left in the tank. But even if he did, this would not be the game or the team to judge that by. His athleticism is not there anymore. His arm strength is not there anymore, and he's playing behind the terrible New York Jets offensive line. I don't expect him to have a very good week this week at all. But to something that Ryan said about the Ravens lacking in offensive prowess most of the time he was there, the one year that he was there, that one magical postseason in 2012, he had guys on that offense like Torrey Smith and Jacoby Jones, and maybe even you can say Anquan Bolden. The only reason I'm saying it like that is because Anquan Bolden was older at this point in his career, and he wasn't as fast as he was. But Jacoby Jones and Torrey Smith were two guys who could get down the field. And when he had that huge arm and that arm strength that he had back in 2012, it worked out perfectly right then and there. We haven't really seen him come close to that since that season came to an end. And that was 8 years ago. So that's saying a lot.
I'll say one thing about Joe Flacco, and then we'll go to some football games. He's a great businessman, isn't he? Yeah, you win a Super Bowl, you collect a big paycheck, you hang around the NFL, and you're smarter than any of them. Would I put him in the class of Bobby Bonilla? No, but Joe Flacco's a pretty good businessman, and he comes from the University of Delaware Blue Hens, who, by the way, I believe had Jeff Comlo way before you guys were even born. Okay, and wasn't Jeff Hostetler, I think, there as well, if I'm trying to remember if he was there. But they've had a lot of good quarterbacks that have come out of the University of Delaware. Jeff Comlo was before you guys were born in 1979. And give you two guys a little history lesson, okay? And Jeff Comlo was taken in the 9th round by the Lions, and Gary Danielson went down to an injury. The second quarterback went in there, and the Lions' reward for that was Billy Sims. So everybody's heard of Billy Sims. With that said, okay, that's the University of Delaware Blue Hen piece of the action tonight. We'll go on to a few football games, 3 of last week's, and then Ryan's probably looking at tonight's game. So if I know him, he's a smart media guy because you have to have that monitor nearby. So we'll lean to him in a moment. We'll talk about 3 of last week's games. New Orleans defeated the Lions 35-29. 5 straight touchdowns for the New Orleans Saints doomed the Lions. The Lions are 1-3. Ryan, what were your impressions of the way the Saints went marching into Detroit at Ford Field?
Well, it wasn't unexpected. I mean, I know that the Lions were, had that streak of giving up double digit leads. What was it, 4 games in a row going back to last year, and then we're able to kind of stop that with the win in Arizona. But I wasn't expecting it to come again. I was expecting New Orleans, even without Michael Thomas. I was expecting them to come in and win this game. So for me, it wasn't such a surprise. The fact that they were able to, the fact that the Saints were able to win this game. For me, it was more of a surprise that the Lions got up early by 14 points again. That was the big surprise to me. I still think that there's enough juice in that offense in the Saints, even without Michael Thomas, to be able to come back from a game, a start like that. And they were able to do that against a Detroit defense that has struggled this year, stopping just about anyone. I mean, that in terms of fantasy points, which, for the most part relates to actual production on the field, they give up the third most to running backs. They have a hard time stopping running backs. So Alvin Kamara obviously was going to be an issue for them. Latavius Murray was running through them like crazy. Oh, yeah. And they really struggle against the pass. And so, it was just one of those perfect scenarios that the Detroit Lions were able to get up early, but they were going to eventually get to the point where they had to play catch up.
Yeah, and when you have Matt Patricia, everybody knows, we've already talked about this a million times. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when he goes to bend but not break. Obviously, he's doing a lot of breaking anyways. But still, I had a feeling the Lions were going to win that game for some reason or another. Not so much what they did with the Cardinals, but playing at Ford Field, to me, I had a feeling, and they were competitive. But when you run off 35 points in a row to the New Orleans Saints, you really take you burst a bubble, so to speak, and that's where they're at this particular point. Xavier McKnight, some thoughts about the Lions before I go over to 2 other football games?
Yeah, I predicted the Saints would win this game. I said it would be a relatively close game. Despite the final score, the game really wasn't as close as it turned out to be, honestly. My biggest takeaway is that Matt Patricia is absolutely horrible. They came out to a 14-0 lead. They somehow lost this game, giving up 5 consecutive touchdowns in a row. And New Orleans knows what they're fighting for here. They're going up against Tampa for the division at this point. So they couldn't afford to fall to 1-3 with Tampa moving up to 3-1. It helps that they're 2-2. And in their case, they're really hoping that Tampa can fall to 3-2 tonight, even though it's not really looking like it's going to get to that point right now, the way the Bucs are playing right now against the Chicago Bears here on Thursday Night Football. But Matt Patricia is absolutely horrible. And he even had the audacity to come out and say last week that when he first came to that franchise, he inherited a team that had a lot of work to do. Jim Caldwell went 9-7 in his final season that he was with the Detroit Lions, and he was fired for some reason. But here's my other thing when it comes to that. The biggest difference in between Jim Caldwell and Matt Patricia, players actually wanted to play for Jim Caldwell. Right. They actually wanted to stay with the Detroit Lions franchise. players can't wait to get away from Matt Patricia. So the Detroit Lions, their fans, they will be very happy once the day comes that he is given his walking papers. And I predict that he will not be given another head coaching job in the NFL ever again.
Well, first of all, let me give you a history, okay? Jim Caldwell is the left the Lions with a winning record. The last guy that did that was Joe Schmidt back in the 70s. And usually when Lion head coaches are recycled, they don't get second chances in the league. So there's a history behind that. And the Jim Caldwell move to me baffles me quite a bit. So, you know, I agree. Matt Patricia's a one and done in the coaching industry. Let's go over the Cleveland Browns beating the Cowboys 49-38. The Baker Mayfield ends up defeating Dak Prescott. The only thing that'll save Baker Mayfield from being a bust is Kevin Stefanski. And I'll tell you what, I got to tell you what, I am kind of impressed with what I've seen early on with the Browns so far. Albeit the Dallas Cowboys can't stop anybody, but let's give Baker Mayfield his due with a brand new coach. He's been able to take advantage of that, Orion.
Yeah, well, I think what helps Baker Mayfield is, again, it's the coaching style and the offensive system. Again, I mentioned this earlier. What is helping Baker Mayfield is he doesn't have the pressure on him of having to throw the ball all the time to Odell, to Jarvis Landry, and to whoever they have at tight end, whether it be Austin Hooper or whatever. The offense runs through Nick Chubb when he comes back from IR because the MCL sprain, and Kareem Hunt, and D'Ernest Johnson is going to get a lot of work in this offense because, again, this offense is going to run through the running backs, and it's going to be the play action that's what's going to free things up for the wide receivers and for Baker Mayfield to throw the ball. That's the way Stefanski's offensive system works. And that's what has helped, quarterbacks like Russell Wilson early in his career. It was the same type of system. It was run heavy, short passes out, and deal with the play action to go deep. So I think that as long as that's the way that they continue to play, that they use that sort of offensive system, Baker Mayfield will continue to be successful in that regard because it's not forcing everything to be on his shoulders. So that was my big takeaway, is that the offense is working exactly as it should through using the best talent that it has, which on this team, yes, they have Odell, they have Jarvis Landry, but with that, the run blocking abilities of that offensive line and having a guy like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt to run the ball, that's going to be your strength, and that's what's going to help set up things to allow those wide receivers and for Baker Mayfield to help put up big points.
Well, I'm a firm believer that a quarterback's only as stable as his coaching, and I'll give you a case in point. I don't believe, in my mind, that Joey Harrington would have been a bust had the Lions had been a little bit more stable coaching. Morningweg, you had Steve Mariucci where you might have had a puncher's chance, but as long as you don't change the head coach and the offensive coordinator every year and you force the quarterback to learn a new system, you got a chance. But Joey Harrington's labeled as a bust. I don't think to some extent he should have been one, but when you're dealing with that type of situation, and as long as they get it right in Cleveland and leave the head coach alone and keep a offensive system intact, I think at least Baker Mayfield still has a chance to work out, and I think the Browns may have saved him in time. Xavier McKnight.
I believe the Cleveland Browns can finally say that they have a head coach that they'll be looking to for the long term. When it comes down to Kevin Stefanski and his coaching style, all you need to pay attention to is some of the key moves they made in free agency outside of Austin Hooper, and also some of the key moves they made in the draft. They added many offensive linemen in this draft. However, what has to be focused on those offensive linemen is they are more better at helping with the run as opposed to helping with the pass. You look at those guys they brought in, Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin played a huge role in Derrick Henry having the production that he's had the past few years with the Tennessee Titans. So that's all you need to know when it comes to that. And Baker Mayfield, maybe he has bought himself a little more time with the Cleveland Browns. I'm really impressed with the AFC North division as a whole right now. The Steelers are playing well. The Ravens are playing well. The Browns are playing well. And the Bengals are interesting with Joe Burrow at quarterback, who is being phenomenal right now as the runaway rookie of the year, despite what Justin Herbert is doing in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Now on to the Dallas Cowboys. Their defense is absolutely horrible. Mike McCarthy appears to be what I thought he was not. I thought he was one of the elite head coaches of the game. It's very clear now that Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers covered up a lot of his shortcomings as a head coach in this league. Those are two of the most talented quarterbacks of all time right there. And he's got another good one here in Dak Prescott, who is off to a phenomenal start this season. I don't want to hear anybody blaming Dak Prescott for any of the Cowboys' struggles right now. This is not on him whatsoever. I'm looking at Mike McCarthy for two things. You have one of the top running backs in football, and you don't even want to use him. I don't know what's going on there. And you brought in Mike Nolan to be your defensive coordinator. Mike Nolan has been recycled from defensive staffs year in and year out, and no one has talked about bringing him in as a defensive coordinator until you did that. And now, because of how the Cowboys defense is playing, we see why Mike Nolan was not being offered jobs as a defensive coordinator, because they have absolutely too much talent on the defensive side of the football to be this awful.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about one more game last week. Tampa Bay 38, the Chargers 31. This is actually a game, I have to admit, when you look at it overall, was a win-win all the way around. The Buccaneers get a really impressive win with Tom Brady, who's obviously proving that Superman's cape is working well, and he's kept Bruce Arians' big mouth shut. And meanwhile, Justin Herbert got a starting job. So there are some things called moral victories, and the Chargers found themselves a quarterback, and Tom Brady keeps winning. And that'll set the stage for what I'm about to talk about in the only three games we're going to talk about tonight. We'll talk about this, and we'll go on to this week's three contests. Xavier McKnight, lead off.
This was my favorite game to watch from week 4 in the matchups, just seeing the Bucs come back from that deficit that they had. To see Tom Brady say that Father Time has not exactly knocked on my door just yet. I'm really excited for Florida and the city of Tampa right now, obviously for reasons that I live here in this area now. And I'm enjoying all the winning that I'm seeing going in this state right now. I don't exactly know how the Rays are doing right now, but they're a game away from the ALCS. The Lightning won the Stanley Cup, and the Bucs look like one of the favorites to come out of the NFC to go to the Super Bowl. So I'm loving what I'm seeing right now, but I'm also loving that Tom Brady is saying I'm not just about done yet. And, of course, he's also saying that right now against the Chicago Bears on Thursday Night Football. We're going to touch on that in just a second. But I agree with you, Scott. It's a win-win situation for both teams here. I did not expect the Los Angeles Chargers to be a playoff team this season once Derwin James was out once again with another injury. He's going to be a key piece of their future going forward. And I just hope and pray for his sake that he can get those injury issues under control, because when he is healthy and when he is on the field, there is an argument that can be made that Derwin James is the best safety in the NFL. I'd much rather say that Derwin James is going to have a career like Ed Reed or Troy Polamalu or Brian Dawkins, as opposed to saying that he could potentially be the next Bob Sanders.
Fair enough. Okay, Ryan, what do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it really was just it was a phenomenal game to watch, just the back and forth, and really to see what Justin Herbert was able to do in that game and leading that team to taking a 24-7 lead, and then obviously you score 31 points as a quarterback. Until this year, you scored 31 points. You expected most likely to get a win out of that game. Right. And obviously, like you said, Derwin James being injured is just, it really hurts this offense, this defense. And I believe Chris Harris Jr. was also out for this game. So that's another talented piece of that defensive secondary not there, which helped to allow, Tom Brady to be able to pick them apart. So very much very interesting. Like you said, win-win for both teams. The fact that, obviously the Buccaneers were able to get the win. Brady was able to play so well to lead the team back, show that he's still got it. But at the same time, just to see how talented that Justin Herbert is and the future's bright for him I keep wanting to say in San Diego, in LA with the Chargers.
That's that. Are you kidding? Yeah, and he's in a brand new stadium. Imagine what a gate attraction he'll be at SoFi Stadium when they actually bring in fans. So good stuff. So, all right, we're not going to make a prediction on this game. One of you guys is going to give me an update, and then we'll talk about two games, and that'll be all she wrote for tonight. So go ahead. Who wants to give me the update?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Bears are up. The Bears are down. The Buccaneers are up 13-0. I want to say that it's 2 minutes left. I've got right here 2 minutes left, 3 minutes left in the second quarter. Really, the Buccaneers have outplayed them in every aspect. More passing yards, more rushing yards. The Bears are starting to charge down the field now, but Foles has not been sharp, missing a lot of passes, missing some open guys. So yeah, it has not been as pretty as Chicago Bears fans were hoping, and so yeah. But I really think that the Buccaneers, if they keep playing like this, very easily will come away with the win.
All I can say is that this matchup reminds me of when I was in college, and as Chris Berman would coin phrase, the NFC Norris. Okay, I used to love it when the Lions and the Bucs were in the same division. Back in my college days, a few years ago, quite a few years ago at USF, the Lions would make their yearly trip to play the Buccaneers. I was working for the Tampa Tribune. And then when I went ahead and covered the Lions full time, I always enjoyed making the trip because obviously, Xavier, I have strong Tampa ties anyway. So, I have a feeling that Chicago quarterback situation isn't as obvious as one thing. Mitchell Trubisky had the keys taken away from him. He may get him back if Foles continues to struggle. But I used to love it when these two teams played twice a year. So it's an NFC North showdown a la 2020. But, give the Bucs their due. They're a team that's playing pretty well. And the more that Brady continues to perform, the less likely that Bruce Arians needs to keep his big mouth shut and focus on coaching the football league team and let the man that's considered the greatest of all time do his job. All right, Xavier.
Just one other point about the Chicago Bears and their offensive struggles. Once Tariq Cohen went down for the season, we knew that was pretty much kind of going to compromise them in some way, somewhat whatsoever. He does so much for the running game, but he's also really good in that short yardage passing attack and being able to go down the field and pick up big yards on his own too. So once you eliminate that from the offense too, you're going to have some issues.
All right, we're going to talk about two more games, and that's it. Indianapolis against Cleveland. I like Jonathan Taylor, the kid out of Wisconsin, and it looks like Phillip Rivers has found a new life out there. And, of course, we've got T.Y. Hilton. I had a very good guest on earlier in the week on the Sports Exchange on Monday night with George Rancorn. His name is A.J. Ricketts, and he's the FIU play-by-play announcer. And I'll tell you what, T.Y. Hilton should have a statue over at FIU. But we had a pretty good time talking about FIU sports. But, when you think about what the Colts are doing there, you got Phillip Rivers, you have Jonathan Taylor, and you have T.Y. Hilton against Cleveland. I think, if nothing else, that'll be an entertaining football game for sure.
Yeah, as far as fantasy goes, I'm very interested to see what happens in this one, especially with talking about how the Cleveland offense has been working very well, very well running the ball and using that to open up things for the pass game. It'll be interesting to see what happens because the Indianapolis Colts right now, in terms of fantasy points, are the best team against quarterbacks. They're the third best against running backs. They really shut down the running backs and don't allow them to get in the end zone. And they're the best team against tight ends. So, again, we've talked about how Cleveland doesn't really use the tight ends. So it'll be interesting to see how well that offensive line for Cleveland can open things up for Kareem Hunt and for D'Ernest Johnson to really get a lot of work going to try to open things up for the wide receivers where where the Indianapolis Colts struggle a little bit more against the passing game against wide receivers. So we'll see what can happen there. As far as the Indianapolis Colts offense goes, I'm really interested to see if Mo Alley-Cox can keep this up as a tight end. We know that Phillip Rivers, over his career, he's had guys like Antonio Gates, Hunter Henry, guys that he likes throwing to the tight end. I like the athleticism of Mo Alley-Cox and believe that he could be a solid sleeper this entire year and really work his way up to being, a top 10 tight end fantasy player, simply because, again, with Phillip Rivers not having the arm strength that he used to, not being able to throw the ball as deep as he used to, using that those short yardage opportunities, I like what he could present. And as far as the rest of the defense goes, or rest of the offense goes, Cleveland struggles against the wide receivers. They struggle against tight ends. Really, the best part of the Cleveland Browns defense right now is the ability to stop the run, which could cause some issues for Jonathan Taylor. But overall, I think that again, this is going to be a very interesting game to see how it plays out.
Your thoughts, Xavier? Then I have one more game to talk about.
I'm going to say that this is going to be a very competitive game. It's probably going to be one of the better games to watch here in Week 5, but I'm actually going to pick the Browns to win this game.
Yeah, me too.
More so because of their passing ability in this game than their running ability. I believe they're going to have a nice rushing day as well, but Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. are playing better, and they're also happier. And the happier those guys are, the better life is going to be in Cleveland. And I believe they'll continue to be happy this week. I'm picking the Browns to win this one.
Yeah, I like the Browns in this one. All right, final game I want to talk about, the LA Chargers and the New Orleans Saints. Boy, once upon a time, we just talked about them a few minutes ago. Now they get to play each other somewhere. I don't know whether they're going to be playing in Indianapolis because of Hurricane Delta, but they'll be playing somewhere. So let's just get a brief observation about this probably being one of the better football games with the Justin Herbert, Drew Brees matchup. This is a really dynamite game to watch. And I should point out that the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers are in bye week, so I really don't have to go out to a sports bar to go anywhere. I get to get some things done around that I haven't been doing for a while. I have to pay attention to this stuff so I can keep up with my homework with you guys every week. But all right, so Xavier, give me a brief observation of Chargers in New Orleans. Ryan, you do it, and I'll go ahead and wrap up the broadcast. All right, go ahead, Xavier.
I'm picking the Chargers to win this game. It's going to be another competitive game, but I believe this will be another part of the coming out party of Justin Herbert. The Saints defense is really struggling so far this season, and I think that's really the most surprising thing when it comes to that team. I believe the offense is going to find a way to put points on the board. They're going up against a defense that's going to be missing Derwin James, they're missing Chris Harris Jr., and they're also missing Melvin Ingram. So they're going to find a way to put up points on the board, but the problem is their defense is not going to be able to stop the Chargers offense in this game, in my opinion. So I'm going to pick the Chargers to win this one in a closely contested matchup. I have the Chargers winning this one 31 to the Saints 27.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I can definitely see the Chargers winning this game. New Orleans has struggled against quarterbacks; they've struggled against tight ends. And when you think about Keenan Allen, the top wide receiver for the Chargers, he runs more of those slot tight end type of routes, where he's more likely to be going. In a lot of cases, he doesn't run outside; he runs more in the slot. And right now, he's actually, I want to say he's right behind Amari Cooper in terms of targets on the season. He's 3 targets behind. He's averaging 12 targets a game. He is going to get a lot of work in the slot, where the defense of the Saints has struggled this year in guarding. So I like the Chargers for this one too. I can see them getting the upset. I do believe that this game was, I think it should be moved to Indy, and just they make that announcement and have it done just for safety's sake.
Well, I mean, I actually figured New Orleans would win 34-27, but I wonder whether or not part of that would be if the game's in New Orleans, so it's in Indianapolis. But I'll just be different for you guys, go 34-27 and be done with it and give New Orleans the benefit of the doubt. With that said, okay, Ryan, why don't you let everybody know how they can get a hold of you? Xavier, you do the same, and I'll wrap it up here for us tonight. And Xavier McKnight will go ahead and give the COVID stuff. I should point out to everybody I'm wearing a Florida Atlantic University hat. Devin Singletary, Alfred Morris, played there. They play in the Conference USA. And the reason why I'm wearing this hat tonight, fellas, is because I covered FAU against Charlotte last week, and that was the first game I had covered since March 11th, 2020, when it was spring training, the Milwaukee Brewers and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So I got to cover FAU against Charlotte. And in that game, FAU scored 21 answered points against Charlotte to win it. So FAU, go Owls tonight, since we have a hat trick here with all 3 of us wearing hats. FAU Owls is my thing. Ryan, take it away.
All right, well, you can get a hold of me on our website, skullkingsports.com. You can get a hold of me on email, ryan.skolrud@skullkingsports.com. We are on Facebook. If you look up Skull King Sports, you will find our many Facebook pages and groups. We are on Twitter, at Skull King Sports. We are on Instagram, Skull King Sports. You can also follow me on Twitter at Ryan Skolrud. And I think that is just about it. You can also see some of my articles not only on on our website, Skull King Sports, but I do have every once in a while a couple featured things on fantasypros.com as well.
Very good. All right, Xavier.
All right, you can follow me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The two I's at the end are capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. You can send me a friend and a follow request on LinkedIn and Facebook just by typing in Xavier McKnight. You can catch more of me here on the WSAN network when we do the real and the rare every other Friday night. Scott and I had a great time doing that show last Friday. We look forward to doing the show again next Friday. And you can also catch more of my content here on this network on my YouTube channel just by typing in Xavier McKnight.
Well done. All right. If you want to hear the audio version of Fantasy Football with Scott, Ryan Skolrud, and of course now Xavier McKnight's the third man in the booth, you can do so by going to Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. If I talk too fast, tell me something I haven't heard before. I'll say it again a little bit slower. Okay. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. I should point out, if you want to follow us on social media, you can go ahead and do so on Twitter at Tribune South. That's the @ Tribune South. Facebook and Instagram, South Florida Tribune. Our YouTube channel is South Florida Tribune. We encourage everybody to subscribe. What do you get for subscribing to the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel? I'll give you 6 reasons why you should. Okay, ready? The Sports Exchange, No Limits, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Xavier McKnight mentioned the real and the rare, Fantasy Football. That's us, okay? And the South Florida Tribune podcast. So that's 6 reasons. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I didn't even know how to count with one hand to get 6, okay? And if you want to go ahead and check out our website, that's another place to find the broadcast, www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a section on there called Motor City Monitor, where we do a lot of stuff in the Metro Detroit area, for which I'm from there. We also get stuff from our media distribution partners. They provide us content. We have columnists as well. And, of course, as I alluded to before, the broadcasts are there as well. You can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. Any suggestions, comments, or whatever, feel free to let us know. If we go ahead and find one of them, we'll be more than happy to bring them up on any of our broadcasts. And finally, you can go ahead and catch up with me, Scott Morganroth, on LinkedIn. Not the Motor City Madmouth isn't on LinkedIn, but Scott Morganroth gets it done. With that said, Xavier McKnight, give the COVID information, and then we'll wrap up the broadcast. Good job, guys.
Well, once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're still hearing about more COVID cases happening throughout the world of sports, throughout the world of politics, and throughout the world in general. This is, once again, another clear sign that we need to continue to take COVID-19 very seriously. Please, let's not be irresponsible. Let's be responsible. Let's be vigilant, and let's do everything we need to do to take care of each other so we can get through this thing. It doesn't appear that it's going anywhere anytime soon. So we all just need to hunker down and do what we need to do to take care of each other. Continue to wear your mask, wear your gloves. Don't touch your face. Please don't gather in large crowds. Please social distance. Guys, the more you continue to do these things, the faster we'll continue to get through this thing and get it out of here. But because many have not done a great job of doing that throughout the course of this year, we are still here, and we are now 2 months, less than 3 months away, I should say, from 2021 happening. And it doesn't appear that we're going to begin 2021 without COVID-19 being a thing. Also, just want to send my best to all the folks in Mexico and everybody on the Gulf Coast and everybody in Louisiana who have been impacted by Hurricane Delta and are in the path of Hurricane Delta right now. You all are definitely in our thoughts. This is the 6th storm that is scheduled to hit down in the Louisiana area this year. So it's definitely been a tough year dealing with the tropics for them and everybody that the tropics have impacted. And once again, it's another key point that hurricane season is truly not over until it is over. It is October, and it's been a while since we had one of these big storms in October, but it's happening right now. And we don't know when another one could possibly be happening before the end of hurricane season, which is scheduled for November the 30th. So just want to continue to send our thoughts and best wishes out to those folks as well.
And 2 other notes I want to close out the broadcast. Congratulations to the Miami Marlins. You had a fine season for a team that really struggled and lost over 100 games. They gave it a gallant effort against the Atlanta Braves. They swept in 3-0, but they beat the Cubs. So congratulations to the Marlins. I know they have a lot of good things to look forward to. And, of course, I want to send my best wishes to my own mother. She continues to battle like a real warrior. I know she's dealing with COPD issues. I haven't had the opportunity to see her in the better part of the year. Hopefully, Thanksgiving I'll be able to get there. But hopefully, depending on what happens. So, Mom, hang in there. I love you. I'll tell you this on every show that I can. And meanwhile, on behalf of Ryan Skolrud and Xavier McKnight. This is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us tonight on this edition of Fantasy Football, and we will catch you next week. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend, and hope all of our information is good. And if you, and my advice when you listen to this broadcast, get a notepad and a piece of paper and a pen, because there's a lot of information. Listen to the broadcast once or twice, okay? Because you're not going to get it all on one shot. Good night, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.